Hello and welcome to Bites, Bread, and Barbecue. Today I would like to discuss about Java database development for freestanding applications. My name is Ross Contino, and I've been doing database programming since 1985. I started with a Commodore 64 and a Clarion database program to develop internship logs when I was starting my medical residency, and I got hooked. And I came up through Microsoft's Visual Basic program with the DAO, then the ADO, learned a lot about developing databases that were related databases with one-to-many relationships, and finally progressed into PHP and SQL to create online databases that you could use where the data was stored in the cloud. If your computer crashed, it was still there in the cloud. However, recently I retired from medicine and I still keep my license up, and I got to thinking it would be interesting to develop a database that would continue to track my continuing medical education without having to pay the American Osteopathic Society several $100s a year to just track my education now that I'm retired. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to do this in Java so that it would be cross-platform and you could run it on Windows, Apple, or Linux. I had been playing with Java for the last couple years, and I had used things like Eclipse and Netbeans to provide a rapid application development environment with a GUI interface. However, every time I tried to develop a database application, somehow I always failed with the SQLite external jar file. Now, I realized this was user failure, that many people do this, but I just couldn't get it right. So I started to experiment a little bit, and the going rage today is to program everything in Visual Studio Code, or its open source cousin Code OSS for Linux, which is essentially a Microsoft product, but is a programming environment where you do a lot of hard coding. So let's take a look at what I was doing with Code OS. What I did was I created a little framework here of what I wanted to do. However, I had always had trouble hooking this database structure up with my particular programming efforts. And I did not even create this part. And I thought, well, everybody today is talking about that AI can help develop your programming skills. So I went over to ChatGPT and said in English, can you create a Java application, continuing medical education, Code OS? It needs 2 tables, username and password, courses, date, number of credit. So I defined the tables, I defined all of the fields, but I did this all in English. And I also wanted it to have a one-to-many relationship so that a different user could log in and log their specific continuing education, thinking that maybe this would have some use in a medical practice if they wanted something light just to track everybody's education on their local computers. And I also wanted it to print reports in case you had to show some sort of proof, and I wanted them to be able to print out and also come out on the screen to separate the credits by MD credits, DO credits, and any other type of education. And lo and behold, doing that big description there, ChatGPT came back and it started outlining exactly what type of application I would do. It gave me a database schema. It also gave me the Java application structure. And it started telling me that I had to use SQLite external jar file, which I already knew, but had never had success doing. So it also started to develop the database Java that I had showed in the previous screen. Now, in truth, this first effort that ChatGPT put forth did not work for me. But then I could tell ChatGPT the different errors that I was receiving, and it would actually debug the code for me. So it almost became a coding partner. It was very interesting for me as it went through and developed these different versions of the application, and it showed that there were various ways to do this, and each time that I ran into a problem with it, it would go and debug the program. Now, I was developing on Linux, so my first run, this was completely made to run on Linux. Then when I went to test it on other environments, after everything seemed to be working fine, I came across one little thing that I did not know. Now, each of these I was running these on Linux, Mac, and Windows. And when I went to do this, I didn't realize that the Java commands from the terminal would not be the same in Windows as they were in Mac and Linux. So if you take a look here, this is the statement that it originally helped me create when I launched this, that I would say that I was going to launch my particular jar file that I had created, the CME tracker, but that this had to be in conjunction with the SQLite external jar file and to launch the main part of the application. And this statement, as it's written here, works perfect on Linux and on a Macintosh. However, under Windows 11 was what I was testing, Windows changes the syntax. Even though it was the same version of Java from Oracle, I was using the OpenJDK 25, this statement has to be separated by a semicolon instead of a colon. And this was driving me nuts, but once I changed that one punctuation mark, the program launched on Windows. It was pretty interesting. So, is ChatGPT going to replace programmers? I don't think so. It can't come up with any original ideas. It can't tell you what is needed, but if you describe it, what you want, it'll help you code and also help you debug. So if we take a look through all this, the code then I just imported from ChatGPT into my code OS, compiled it into a jar file, and ran the programs. So let's take a look at what they looked like in all three operating systems. If you found this interesting or helpful in any way, please select that like button down below. And if you really found it helpful, you can hit subscribe. I also posted an article on my website and my blog regarding my adventures with ChatGPT and trying to program with a cross-platform Java database application. So stop by and take a read. Thanks for stopping by at Bites Bread and Barbecue.